My guest today is Colonel Joe O'Callahan, the Fire Support Officer for the Army's 18th Airborne Corps. Colonel O'Callahan, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for interviewing.
Let me just add a little context for our discussion. The Defense Department has been on a journey in earnest to take advantage of artificial intelligence capabilities since really it launched the Joint AI Center in 2019. The JAIC has helped the military services and defense agencies build capabilities, promote adoption to accelerate the adoption of AI across every aspect of the military's warfighting and business operations, and now it's actively seeking the best ways to solve problems. Now, underlying those operations and warfighting challenges is, of course, data. The services have started to operationalize AI through data by crossing real and imaginary boundaries, by interacting with disparate data sets to serve up intelligence and operational data sets across the battle space, and by orchestrating AI capabilities at a strategic, operational, and tactical level. The Army's 18th Airborne recently completed an exercise that demonstrated many of these AI and data capabilities. And to learn more about Scarlet Dragon, we turn to Colonel Joe O'Callahan, the Fire Support Officer for the Army's 18th Airborne Corps. Now, let me just start at the beginning because I love the name. Let me start there. And I love the fact that the military has gotten creative in names. I wrote a story just recently about the Navy and all their different names, Operation Cattle Herd and so many other ones. So I'm glad to see that, the Air Force is having fun with Kessel Run and Kobayashi Maru. So Scarlet Dragon, another great name. What is it? It just concluded in early October. Discuss it, the goals. Just give me a little bit of background.
Hey, Jason, really appreciate you digging into this. So Scarlet Dragon is a quarterly event that we run here on Fort Bragg. And really what it's allowing us to do is train on the mission essential tasks associated with the Army's Global Response Force component, which is known as the 18th Airborne Corps. So the Corps here, representative of about 90,000 soldiers, is charged with rapid early entry into any theater and specifically joint forcible entry. And we do that with our 82nd Airborne Division. The 18th Airborne Corps is unique in that sense. And if you were to follow the history of the Corps in the last 2 years, anything from the demise of Qasem Soleimani to the recent events at Kabul International Airport, the Corps power projected in a matter of hours globally. And so to that point, we also tend to harness the most ready technology the quickest, because modern warfare today is really about decisions. And decisions are predicated on the concepts of data fabrics, and how do you get that information rapidly to a decision maker with enough context so you can execute what you need to do. Now, as we move out of 20 years of COIN operations, and back to a focus on large scale combat operations. The 18th Airborne Corps, in conjunction with 2MEF, the Navy's Information Warfare Development Command up at Norfolk, and as well as also the Air Force 53rd Wing and others, have really embarked on how do we do our job better by harnessing data to get us towards true data-centric warfare. And this has been an evolution that we've been doing through the Scarlet Dragon quarterly exercises, where we started initially with, could we harness AI? Then we moved on to, could we do multi-domain? How do we do the multi-domain? Do we grow that out? How do we really take the lessons of the two former Scarlet Dragons and go into Scarlet Dragon 3, which really made us understand that AI, data, and JADC2 are all chapters in the same book. And then finally, we moved forward to Scarlet Dragon 4, which is the most recent, acknowledging that Army Corps also need to be Joint Task Force capable and support the different components. And now that's a unique change. We're no longer doing Army exercises for Army purposes. What we understand is that in a joint environment, all the services are intimately combined, and we pull the best capabilities out of each other. And data is a large part of that, right? Because the Army doesn't just produce data, the Navy produces data, the Air Force produces data. And so how do we get to a point where we are able to harness artificial intelligence to cull through that data, get access to that data, harness that data through AI, produce what we need out of the AI there, and then make decisions rapidly? And that's moving us forward and allowing us through each Scarlet Dragon to get better and better and better as we continually really do what corps do best, and that's shaping operations. Now, just to add a little bit to that, the name Scarlet Dragon really comes out of two things. It's the color of the artillery field artillery in the Army and the Marine Corps is Scarlet, right? And then the Scarlet color that the Marine Corps uses. And so since our first partners were with Second Meth down at Camp Lejeune, we chose the name Scarlet Dragon to be representative of the fact that this truly isn't just the Army. This is a joint effort by a community really of the willing.
You mentioned that this was the fourth time Scarlet Dragon kind of the exercise happened, and it began back in 2020. What have you learned? How have you kind of progressed? You talked about the cold data, send it through the AI algorithms and then make those decisions more rapidly. Is that how you're kind of measuring the success? How quickly you can put live fire on target to do what? Like what is the end result you're aiming for?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what we wanted to do is, and I go back to those mission essential tasks, those that we have as the 18th Airborne Corps, the air component has, and the penetration of an IAS to deliver us the emerging tasks of the Navy, and then the tasks that the Marine Corps have. And we all have our typical tasks. The question is, how can we do them better, quicker? It's more about decision advantage than anything else. The AI is seductive, it's interesting, people gravitate towards it. But really what this is about is how do we compress the workflows that we are doing to go at the speed of machine, harnessing machine-to-machine communications aided by that AI so that that human is rapidly making the decision. And so that really brings us to what have we learned. It's interesting in Scarlet Dragon 3, well, Scarlet Dragon 2, we knew we were onto something with how quickly we could make decisions. So Scarlet Dragon 3, we tried to say, okay, I want to see how many targets I can detect in an hour. And so what we found out is we absolutely flooded the legacy processes of humans to execute it. And we realized this is not about how many targets I can develop, it's about decisions. And so what we had realized in Scarlet Dragon 2, saying, hey, we can make all these decisions, let's make it into targets. We realized in the end, it's truly about decisions. And so the AI enables us to make leaps and bounds, quicker decisions than we ever have before, as well as also harness concepts that we hadn't really truly brought in the past, such as the emerging hybrid space layer between commercial industry and government, where we bring all those sensors together to give us true multi-domain awareness. We never really thought our way through what does a joint task force have to provide to, say, submarines, acknowledging that a sub is an absolutely critical component and has targets of a joint task force and has targets that it has to go after, say, penetrating somebody's shoreline. And so all these things began to emerge. And what we found as we did the autopsy of every Scarlet Dragon was we were doing a few things. Increasing decision speed caused us to relook what the human roles were in standard workflows. We had to evolve from serial processing workflows to parallel processing workflows. And indeed, from there, raise the demand signals through all the departments that effectively, serial technology is by and gone. We understood that the days of a common operating picture are gone. You no longer have a COP and a SIP. You have an integrated user experience because you have to interact with that data. And it's fascinating that science fiction really is almost a precursor to what you're working with. And so you're mining, how do you present that data to a human being in the sense that they can understand it and make decisions and mine rapidly behind it. And so I think the final thing we learned was that a lot of times industry had been moving down. We're going to create AI for analysts. And that ended up being the wrong way of doing business. You had to create AI for a workflow, for the operator, for the decision maker, and then retool what the analyst actually does. So an analyst no longer, say in target development, is really the guy who's plugging through and chugging information. He's no longer spending hours looking at an image. He's actually the supervisor, because the AI is doing the jobs that routinely were done by, or the rote jobs that were routinely done by young soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians. And so now we can fly through that and process that data rapidly. And so we've taken a unique view towards workflows and AI utilization. Don't build it for an analyst, build it for an operator. but build the ability for the analysts to be on the loop. Now they're in the loop right now. Objectively, we're going to get on the loop. The other thing we've been really working with and acknowledge is AI is hard. You know, when you sit down and talk to people about AI, they treat it like salt. I want to sprinkle a little AI on this, a little AI on that. And that's true. And there's value in that, but that's wave top. You have to really dig into AI. And so when you dig into AI, AI is about data. And this gets back to this whole concept of data is really the heart of everything we're working with. And so we've had to harness that data as we really look to what is a data fabric for the Corps or for the Army or for the Joint Force. How do we label that data? How do we secure that data so that it's not penetrated by a foreign entity? And how do we utilize that data for our workflows or for our AI as it develops?
All right, a lot there to unpack. Let me maybe take a half a step back. And I think the one thing you said that is really important here is number one, AI for not analysts, but for the workflow, for the decision maker. Did that require kind of a change of look, a change of kind of viewpoint that you had to take as you're setting up these systems? Because you're right, so much of this AI, so much of the data is for the person or the group that is saying, is putting the pieces together, but really it's the end result that you really want to get that to. Did that require you all to change your approach in some way or change your thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And it challenges a lot of people's understanding of what their job is. And so, you know, you spend millions of dollars teaching a kid, hey, your job is to take these two intelligence sources, fuse them, and then provide them to somebody who puts it out in a product. That product goes out in a periodic format, and then decisions are made from that. What we're doing is we're getting to the point where we're converging the intelligence role to the operations role in many cases. And so to that point, the analyst has to now look not to necessarily to look at something and make a decision on what he's looking at. He has to look at what the flow of the data is. Is the data also of the right level? Are the AI models that are being utilized, have they been trained to the appropriate levels to conduct the initial analysis? And at that point, he's basically supervising and checking it and saying, yep, it's good to go. And so what does this really mean? Well, what this really means is that, say, a traditional legacy analysis of a GeoInt product would require a human to look at something for 40 minutes and say 7 gigabytes of bandwidth. But if you can get that down to say 15 kilobytes of bandwidth and it's being done in 1 minute, then you've made significant gains. And that's what we're seeing really arise out of Scarlet Dragon. And so I draw attention to the fact that when you can do that, you can also have multiple analysts working concurrently. And now concurrently, if they're fusing the products with the AI in this common environment, this UI UX, this interoperable user experience, then you're moving at the speed of machines. And then the decision is made. And then instead of having to go through a typical human picking that up, making a phone call to send that something or air gapping it to another computer, the command is issued right from the UI UX to whatever strike platform is going after the target. And so what we've seen is a significant compression in the threads that were typically there for any kind of mission. And it's really causing people to, in some cases, have an identity crisis as they understand and learn how data flows, and then retool themselves for a higher echelon. And so this is really something that on the ops side, also, you were used to traditionally getting a 12-hour, 24-hour product. Now you're having to make decisions the second something pops up in front of you and determine what you want to do with it. And so that's challenging the typical workflows that somebody had, which means that in many cases, you're having to power down decision-making to the lowest echelon and have faith that the individuals who are making those decisions are making them in an informed manner with what that analyst is producing at the speed of machine.
We got to take a quick break, but that's really impressive to take down that decision-making time, that analyst time from 7 minutes going through, as you said, just gigabytes of data to 1 minute and kilobytes of data, just because it's finding the needle in the needle of needles. And I think that's really going to make the decision process better, but also faster, which is all important. Colonel, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the discussion, Technology and Great Power Competition, sponsored by Palantir on Federal News Network.